Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to make this interactive Slider Surprise card using MFT Stamps Mermazing stamp set and the new Slider Surprise die that was just released. We're going to make this great underwater scene with a cute little mermaid on the front of our card, and then you pull the tab to reveal this great little underwater scene beneath her, and there is a surprise sentiment there as well. So here are the two components to the Slider Surprise card. The first is this little pull tab that I cut from some white cardstock, and I'm going to set that aside. And here is the front panel or the focal panel, and there are some score lines that the die will etch into your little die cut to help you figure out where you need to make your creases later on to engage the interactive mechanism. So let's start by decorating this focal panel, and I just slipped a little piece of scratch paper underneath my center panel because I'm going to have two different designs on the side of the card versus on the center panel. And for the center panel, I am just trying to make a cute little sea scene or ocean scene for my mermaid to sit on later on. So I'm going to make the bottom of the scene a little bit darker, and I'm going to use my chipped sapphire distress oxide ink here, and then I'm going to blend that all together with my tumbled glass. And then at one point I reach for my Faded Dreams distress oxide to kind of help the tumbled glass blend in better to the chipped sapphire, as the chipped sapphire is pretty dark. And I'm just trying to get my tumbled glass at the top to kind of blend out almost into nothing into the purple or wisteria cardstock. I cut out this front panel from Wisteria cardstock by MFT Stamps, and I'm not sure if you've done this, but you can definitely do distress oxide ink blending over your cardstock. Since the distress oxide is largely opaque, you will still retain a lot of color from the oxide inks. They won't kind of get lost or blended into the color of the cardstock. So now I'm just going to add a few little water droplets on the center panel just to help reinforce that this is an underwater scene, and maybe these are like little bubbles around our mermaid or just little currents or things going on in the water. And now we're going to work on decorating the edges of our card panel. And I'm using some shaded lilac here, and I'm just kind of running it along the edges just to give the front panel a little bit of dimension and interest. One of the things I found most difficult with this die set was making the front panel interesting looking. It's really easy to make your inside panel interesting, but the front, there are some limitations as to what kind of design elements you can add. So using these distress oxide inks over the cardstock was kind of my way of dressing up the front panel. And now we're going to add some speckles onto the frame or the edges of our front panel, and I'm just using the chipped sapphire mixed with a little bit of water here, and I'm just using my paintbrush and I'm just kind of flicking the back of it until I get enough speckles to make my card kind of interesting looking. And then once I'm done with the blue, I'm going to do the same thing with a shaded lilac because I thought that the frame needed some light. Even if I had some white handy, I would have used white, but I didn't, so I figured the shaded lilac would be close enough to the white just to give a little bit of interest to this frame. Okay, so here's our frame, and now I'm going to set that aside to dry while we work on the inside of the card, and this is the surprise element. So I just stenciled in the area that is going to show through on the front panel just so I know where to set my little images here. We're going to end up coloring the entire card panel, but I wanted to make sure whatever I stamped did show up in the card when you finally engage the interactive mechanism or pull the little window up. Maybe that's an easier way to put it. So I'm just going to mask all these images that I stamped, and I put a placeholder for the sentiment before just because I'm not going to stamp the sentiment until after I color in the background, because it could have bled into the scene if I did that. And I wanted to make sure that I stamped the other images in the right location. So that's why I had that little placeholder sentiment when I was stamping my little fish and my shells. So for the ocean floor, we're going to start with E34 at the bottom, and then E31 and E30. We're going to blend that into BG10, and then into B000, and then B21, and then B34. And that's going to give us our little ocean and our little like sea floor. Now we're going to add some little specks of sand around the shells, and some of the shells I masked off the bottom of them so that it appears as though they're kind of half sunken into the sand, and that's why I'm making the little mounds of sand around them, just to help reinforce the effect. And the colors that I'm using for my speckles of sand are E39, E35, E34, and then E31. And the speckling method is the same method that I would use if I was going to make crumb on a cake. Also another good way to get a realistic crumb, to just make these little speckles in different shades of the same color. And then for our shells, I'm going to color them with BV00 and BV04, and then our little, I guess those are little snails, we're going to color them in with YG 67, 17, 13, and 11. And I chose these colors so that they complement the colors that I'm going to use on the front of the card. So we have a lot of purple on the front of the card, and then our little mermaid is going to have a dark green tail, and she's going to be wearing like a rose colored or a coral colored bikini top. So I just wanted to kind of mimic those colors. And then I added in the yellow for these fish on the top, just to give a little splash of color and to make sure that the rainbow is as well represented as it can be in this little underwater scene. And I stamped the bubbles with one of the stamps that are in the, I think it's Girlfriends stamp set by MFT. And then I just colored them in with a little B45 and BG10, just to give the bubbles a little bit of dimension. And now I'm gonna place the sentiment, and I put a piece of vellum on top just to make sure I didn't get any ink onto the scene while I was just trying to figure out if I had the right placement for our sentiment. And I stamped our sentiment with black Versamark ink because it's nice and black and clean and crisp. And so here we have it. So we have our background panel, we have our focal panel, and now we have our little mermaid, and we're going to color her in, and then we're going to color a little rock for her to sit on, and then I'm going to die cut those, and then we're going to add them to the top of the focal panel in a moment. Now the size of the back panel is 4 inches by 5 1/4, and it's the same exact size as the front panel, that lilac front panel you saw before. It's 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then we're going to add everything to an A2 size card base in a little bit. Okay, so for the mermaid, I decided to go with traditional coloring for her, making her look like a little Ariel. So we're going to give her some auburn hair, or some like brownish auburn hair. And to do so, we're going to use E09, E39, E13. And then to just darken up her roots, we're going to add a little bit of E29. And the trick to hair is you just want to make sure that you don't blend your little stripes of color very well, because the little stripes of color is what gives the look and feel of hair. All right, so for her tail, we're going to start with a base of YG11. And then for the little shadow areas, we're going to use YG67. And I'm going to focus my shadows like beneath her knees, and then her little waist and her hip area that's kind of obscured by her arm and her hair. And then the edges of the tail, I'm going to give a little bit of shadowing to. And then I'm just trying to keep that center part of her tail and the center part of her fins nice and light, just to add to the fact that she's a three-dimensional being. For her little bodice, I just used some coral colors in R30, R20, and R22. And now I'm just going to put some little speckles with a YG97 and a YG67 on her tail, just to make it look like, I don't know, little fish stuff on her tail, right? Like they could be scales, they could be, I don't know, little barnacles or something. Although I kind of feel bad thinking a little mermaid with barnacles on her, but you know, whatever it is that gives mermaids the textured look to their tail, that's what we kind of did with the dots. For this little rock here, I'm just using all different shades in the E40s and focusing the shadows on the edges of the card, using the lines that are printed in the stamp as a guidepost as to where to add my shading. And then I'm going to die cut both pieces using the die cuts that come with the stamp and die set. And that's all done. Now is the fun part. Now we get to put everything together. So this is kind of how I want it to look. I want the little mermaid to sit on the top. And then we're going to have a sentiment on that little bottom strip on the center panel that says, "Hey, girlfriend." And I'm embossing that with some white embossing powder. And this sentiment comes from the, I think it's called Fantastic Friends stamp set. It's a stamp set that has all the fish that was released a while ago. Either that or Gill Friends. Gill Friends or Fantastic Fish, one or the other. We're going to give a little dimension to this bubble with B45 and then BG10, and then put a little white highlight with a white gel pen. And then I just put some little polka dots on her bikini top, and then also on the star. And then I'm just going to go over her eyes with a black gel pen or glaze pen, and then I gave her tiny little eyelashes with a 0.1 Copic multi-liner. All right, so now we're going to fold the score lines. So the first score line, we're going to bend backwards. So it's kind of like a tent. That's the way they describe it in the MFT instructional video. And then for that little bottom score line, we're going to fold that upwards. And then we have this cute little accordion fold at the end of the day. And that's all you need, are just those two folds. And now we're going to attach the center tab. And the tab, you want the rounded edges to go along the top of the card, and the top of the card is where there's that little notch. We're going to apply adhesive to just that tiny little strip, making sure not to get it anywhere else on the card. And then we're going to attach our pull tab to that strip, and we're going to make sure it's centered nice. Okay, now we're going to finish decorating the front of our card by putting the little rock down, and then we're going to sit our mermaid on top of the rock. Very, very important. Do not put tape anywhere above that middle crease, because we need the image to pop up. And if you put tape on the mermaid's head, she wouldn't pop up. And now we're going to flip the panel over and apply some foam tape. So we're going to put a thick layer of foam tape along the bottom of the card, and then I'm going to just put a 1/4 inch strip of score tape along either sides of our pull tab, and no tape along the top. And then I just put a little sentiment that says "pull here" from another interactive stamp set I have. And then this next part is really critical. We need to make sure we put the panel on exactly right. So we need to line things up perfectly, and then it looks like it was a success. So now I'm just going to pull the little tab, and there we have it. We have our cute little surprise underwater scene on the inside. I'm just going to play with it a few more times just to kind of loosen up the creases in our center panel and make sure everything is working nicely. And now we're going to put the whole thing onto an A2 size card base. With this card, you need to be very careful and make sure that you line up the top edges of the card with the top of the card panel. Otherwise, you won't be able to pull up the little pull tab. So there you have it. There is our little mermaid slider surprise card. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you give this card a try. I had a lot of fun with it, and I can't wait to send this in the mail to my little niece. I think she'll really Love it. Have a great weekend, everyone, or a great week, depending on when you're tuning in, and I'll see you again soon in the next video.